Hi, buonasera. It's your boy Big Rich, Queens, New York City, where we get busy. Gentlemen, wipe your feet on the rug, throw some smoke in the atmosphere. It's a mob spotlight. You know what I'm saying? Let's get right down to business. First of all, let me show a little respect to my boy, who's the researcher of all this, right? I'm on the streets all day. While I'm in the streets doing what I gotta do, Shatter just gets information together for me to take care of it and bring it to you guys, all right? So, Mob Spotlight, let's get right down to business. Bonanno Boss, Joseph Massino, written by David Amoruso from Gangsters Inc. Now, this was written back in 2001, 2002, so mind the dates. You understand what I'm saying? Joseph Massino was a rarity. He was the only official mob boss who wasn't in a prison cell. The press called him the last Don. To the outside world, Massino was a great boss with old school Cosa Nostra values. His crime seemed to run smooth as well. But by January 2005, things looked totally different. Here's the story. Joseph Massino was born on January 10, 1943. He began his underworld career as a truck hijacker and quietly rose in the rank. When then Bonanno family boss Carmine Galante got whacked July 1979, Massino was a capo. The slaying of Carmine Galante brought the Bonanno family into a new family war. The family now had to select a new boss. This was what cut the family in half with two factions. One faction supported proposed new boss Philip Rusty Rastelli, while the other faction was against Rastelli as new boss. Massino supported Rusty Rastelli and aligned himself with him just as Capo Sonny Black Napolitano, Sally Ferrugia, and consigliere Steve Canoni. The faction that opposed Rusty Rastelli was made up of captains Cesar Bonventre, Philip Philly Lucky Giacconi, Dominic Big Trin Trinchera, and Alphonse Sonny Red Indelicato. Eventually, the faction supporting Rastelli won, killing three captains of the other faction in a shotgun ambush. It has been rumored that Massino was one of the shooters at that ambush, allegedly. Rastelli became boss, and it seemed that finally all would be well within the ranks of the Bonanno family. All was well until the FBI paid Sonny Black a visit. They had a message for the family. For 6 years, they had an undercover FBI agent within their ranks. The famous Donnie Brasco, a.k.a. Joseph D. Pistone, had infiltrated the Bonanno crime family, and before the Bonanno members really realized what happened, it was raining indictments and members were murdered. Sonny Black, blamed for bringing Donnie Brasco too close to the family, was found shot to death with his hands cut off. Massino wasn't whacked. He was just indicted. In 1986, Massino was convicted and sent to prison on charges stemming from the Bonanno's control of Teamsters Local 814, the union that represents furniture movers. During his trial, when Pistone walked past Massino on his way to the witness stand to testify against him, the adversaries eyed each other. "Hey, Donnie," Massino reportedly said, "who'd you get to play me in the movie?" Unfortunately for Massino, the movie Donnie Brasco with Al Pacino and Johnny Depp was more about Sonny Black's crew than his. When Philip Rusty Rastelli died in 1991, Massino was the obvious choice for the new boss. When Massino went to prison, the Bonanno family was on its way to extinction. Its members, considered mob outlaws, did not have a seat on the Mafia's fabled commission, the governing group that oversees the city's 5 crime families. An internal war left several members dead, and rampant drug dealing in the family brought intense pressure from the Drug Enforcement Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigations. When Massino came back, he had a lot of work to do. In 1993, Joseph Massino was released from prison and came back to work. He ran the Bonanno family with Salvatore A. Vitali, his brother-in-law, and underboss, and 73-year-old Anthony Sparrow as consigliere. Under Massino's lead, the Bonanno crime family had turned around completely. Electronics whiz with a penchant for secrecy and discretion. He lives modestly with his wife in Howard Beach, Queens, a few blocks from the home of his friend, the late Gambino crime boss John Gotti. He's careful. He's a very smart guy, said one NYPD organized crime detective. He's wise to surveillance, and he lives by the old school rules. He believes in keeping La Cosa Nostra secret. Massino was the level-headed leader who stopped the erosion of the family power. He shut the Bonanno social clubs and avoided other situations that might invite surveillance. Massino had denied any involvement in La Cosa Nostra and has accused the federal government of bias against Italian Americans. His principal source of legitimate income, authorities say, is King Caterers, a Farmingdale, Long Island business that provides food to street vendors. He is also part owner of the Casablanca restaurant in Maspeth, Queens, where he likes to enjoy the finer Italian cuisine in the city and meet with other mobsters. Casablanca once hosted a sit-down of the mob's ruling commission, authorities said. It is a joint where you could round up the usual suspects too. Bonanno capos were regular guests at the restaurant, court papers said. It seemed Massino was doing a great job running his crime family. The Bonanno family regained its seat on the commission, and its crews have beefed up longtime interests in narcotics, unions, loan sharking, gambling, and joker poker machines. Massino looked like he was untouchable. Even his Bonanno family seemed untouchable. But at the year's end, things around Massino started to crumble. His underboss and consigliere both went away. Sparrow was indicted on racketeering and murder charge and was found guilty in 2001 and sentenced to life in prison. Massino didn't panic and replaced him. Anthony T.G. Graziano was promoted to consigliere and was seen in company of Massino on flights to Mexico and Italy. However, unfortunately for Massino, Graziano was indicted again in 2002 on murder conspiracy, drug trafficking, extortion, and illegal gambling charges allegedly committed in the past 12 years. Massino, however, was not indicted in any of these high-profile cases. In January of 2003, Massino's world collapsed. He was indicted and arrested on January 9th, 2003 on, among other things, murder charges. Massino pled innocent. If convicted, Massino faced life in prison. On May 24th, 2004, the trial began and things didn't look good. 8 Bonanno turncoats were set to testify against Massino. Among those 8 was Massino's brother-in-law, close friend, and underboss, Salvatore Vitale. Massino, older by 5 years, taught Vitale how to swim. Massino was the best man at Vitale's wedding and later served as godfather to one of his sons. And it was Massino who brought Vitale into the Bonanno crime family in the early 1970s. But things turned sour between the two men. Vitale was shelved. Vitale testified, "I had the title, but for lack of a better term, I was a figurehead." It became known later that Massino had thought about having Vitale killed, but decided to shelf him instead to spare his wife the loss of her brother. Vincent Vinny Gorgeous Bassiano was recorded on tape saying, "Unfortunately, we all do our mistakes, but some mistakes are too gruesome to learn from." He was thinking about his wife, and he probably in the back of his mind didn't want to actually believe it. Massino was accused of 7 murders. The murders were Alphonse Sonny Red Indelicato, Philip Philly Lucky Giacconi, and Dominic Big Trinchera, who were killed in May 1981. Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano, who was killed in August of 1981. Tony Mira, a Bonanno soldier who was killed February 8, 1982, after his bosses found out he was the first member of his crime family to befriend Pistone. He was shot in a lower Manhattan parking garage. Cesar Bonventre, a rival capo of Massino's who was killed in April of 1984. Gabriel Infanti, a mob hitman who was killed between October and December of 1987 after he botched at least 3 jobs and was believed to be talking to the feds. He was shot in a warehouse on Staten Island. Turncoat mobster Frank Copa testified Massino told him mobster Gabriel Infanti was killed because it was feared Infanti could give incriminating testimony in a civil racketeering case. On July 30th, 2004, Massino was found guilty on all counts. Besides the 7 murders, he was also found guilty of arson, extortion, and money laundering. He was scheduled to get life in prison without parole when he was sentenced February 1st, 2005. On January 27, 2005, the unbelievable news broke. Massino was cooperating with the authorities. He flipped. Disgracia. Massino had secretly recorded his acting boss, Vincent Basciano, plotting the assassination of a federal prosecutor. Massino also got Basciano to talk about the Pizzolo murder. I thought this kid would have been a good wake-up call for everybody, Basciano was recorded saying. Why did Massino turn, you may ask? Well, of course, he did not want to sit in prison cell for the rest of his life or face a lethal injection for the Skia murder. But I think more importantly, he wanted to care for his family. No, not his crime family. Because of Massino becoming a turncoat, the feds will not take his and that of his wife house in Howard Beach, Queens. Massino's 89-year-old mother, Adeline, can also rest easy that the feds won't evict her from her house in Middle Village, Queens, which Massino formerly owned. And that is the story thus far. Massino is the first New York Mafia boss to become a turncoat. According to Salvatore Vitale Massino, once told him, John Gotti set us back 100 years. How many years will Joseph Massino set the Mafia back? On June 23, 2005, Joseph Massino was sentenced to life in prison. He received 2 life sentences after he admitted ordering the slaying of Bonanno family captain Gerlando George from Canada, Skia, and waived his rights to appear his convictions last year for several other slayings. His cooperation got him everything he wished for and more. On July 10, 2013, Massino's life sentence was reduced to time served, which ends up about 10 and a half years. He was the sole culprit behind all of the crimes committed by members of his Massino crime family, was sentenced to life in prison, faced the death penalty, and will now be able to live out the rest of his life in freedom. At age 70, the big boss is a shining example of what high rank in the mob and becoming a government witness can do to your time in prison. It can make it disappear like dead bodies in an oven. Though he is living in freedom, Massino will be under FBI supervision for the rest of his life. Whether that is for safety of the public or simply to keep his thick body dying of lead poisoning is up for debate. When asked by the judge if Massino had anything to say, the former Bonanno boss said, I pray every night for all of the people I hurt, especially the victims' families. With the sun beaming down on Massino's face as he eats another slice of pizza in some unknown location, I'm sure the families of his victims will be very pleased to hear about his prayers. And then again, maybe not. Now, here's one thing you guys should know. Massino was one of the most intelligent bosses of the Bonanno family until he flipped. He got them back on the commission. Almost renamed the family because Joe Bonanno broke Omerta by writing that book, A Man of Honor. Rudy Giuliani used that same book to take down the commission in 1987. The commission wouldn't let Massino rename the family because it would have been a complete embarrassment. Okay, those are some side notes that, Shattered wanted me to share with you guys. And, of course, salute to Shatter, right? Got the spotlight for us. Of course, David Amoruso, salute to you, sir. Very well written. Everybody have a good evening. Salute. We'll talk soon.